Hello and welcome to a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and I'm back this week with a brand new podcast and a new guest. Of course, it's back for the third time. Yeah, he's been on this. Wow, there you go. Reoccurring podcast. It's Jordan Green.
Oh, it must be fourth time, right?
Star Wars Boys twice. That's
Star
it.
Wars Boys twice.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting it wrong on my own podcast. Thanks for correcting me there.
Yeah, man, it's only because I've been binging the hell out of the podcasts that I'm so up to date on it, you know.
You're the only one. No, I'm kidding, but there's a few. There's a few loyal listeners out there. Thank you very much anyway for your time. And it's this week we're going to be talking about something a little bit more serious. I do have a light-hearted tone for, like, as you've heard, 90% of the podcast, I like to be a little bit less serious and a little bit more joyful in finding things. And that was why I started in the first place, was to basically lighten things up because people were depressed in COVID and to have some interesting conversations. But this week we're talking about Chester Bennington, who sadly passed away in July of 2017. One of my heroes growing up, along with in the previous podcast, I spoke about Robin Williams. He was another hero growing up. I know most people will be thinking, there's a theme. They killed themselves. What is going wrong here, Chris? You're idolizing people who are thoroughly depressed. I think it's actually because...
Do we need to talk?
Do we need to talk? Exactly. This is no. Thankfully, one of the others is Dave Grohl. So Dave Grohl's a happy, lovable life person. So that's good.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
He's doing all right. But for me, it's the people who care the most about others, and they put themselves second to other people in some ways, but they put their craft and their art and their ability to make other people happy first in some ways. And maybe that is a negative, as we're going to address today with Chester. But for me, I think it is admirable that they were able to put that craft first and be able to change so many lives. I mean, Jordan, for you, when was the first time?
Sometimes you think that the craft might be one of the things keeping them afloat, you know?
Yeah, that's a big one. And for me, whenever I'm thinking of Linkin Park, is the lyrics and the darkness within it. So there's definitely that, is that Chester's link to that was there. I was going to ask you, when was the first time you'd listened to Linkin Park or Chester in general?
It's got to go easily back to year 4 or 5 at primary school, maybe even earlier. But I had some friends who were into the same sort of stuff. I didn't have an older brother, but they had older brothers who obviously had listened to this stuff, and they had CDs back in those days. And I think they sort of introduced me to it, because I remember they'd come to school singing these songs and mentioning these bands, and I was like, what the hell is this? I've never heard that in my life. Because I was, like, don't get me wrong, like I said before in the other podcast, I was raised on heavy metal and stuff, but there was these newer bands at the time, like Linkin Park, and I'd never really heard of it. And then I used to stay at my grandparents' house on the weekends just because they were awesome. It was a thing to do. And they had Sky TV, which we didn't have at home at the time, and they had channels like Kerrang and Skut. And I started hearing Linkin Park on there. And do you ever get it where you've heard of a band and you sort of build a preconception about what they're going to sound like, and then when you hear it the first time, you're like, oh, holy shit, this is awesome. This is nothing like I thought it was going to be. Yeah, so I had that sort of thing, and from there on, big old fan. And then I had another friend who we used to hang out or go to stuff together when we were little, and one of us had a Linkin Park CD, and we used to make our mum or dad or whoever who was driving put it on in the car, so that became the soundtrack for every car journey. And yeah, it all started off pretty early on.
Love that. I mean, that's crazy for me, because I didn't discover, I mean, for me, it was either one of 2 years. It was either 2007 when I was 11 or 2009 when I was 13. So you were way ahead of the times. That's crazy. I love that. I mean, mine's a little bit more embarrassing. I discovered it was either in 2007 because of Twilight. I know. We'll move on from that. But either that or 2009. Leave out all the rest. was, I think it was either 2009, the newer album. No, 2007 was, I want to say, not The Hunting Party. I can't remember the album off the top of my head, but Leave Out All the Rest was. Yeah, I know,
I still think
dude.
of that as like their new stuff.
It is. I was just about to get onto that because like they're considered, at the time they were considered new metal, weren't they? Like, and they got criticized for that very heavily in the beginning. I was going to ask you, did you see that?
Awesome. Yeah, I know they got a load of stick. It's the same as like Limp Bizkit and stuff.
Introducing
got also awesome. Don't get anyone said. But yeah, it's just that whole sort of era got a lot of stick. You know, like the big baggy jeans and chunky skate shoes era, as I like to call it.
So good, so good. Or as I know them.
But it's one of those things now where people look back on it very fondly, and I think, well, it can't have been that bad if you miss it.
Dude, there's a level of nostalgia for the 90s that is never gone away, I don't think, for a lot of people, and for the early 2000s, me included on this one for the early 2000s. And when you say the baggy jeans and the massive trainers, that's such a, like, I always think of like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I'm thinking like the early sort of like vibes of the 90s punk in that era. Oh, so good. So good.
That was the time to be alive.
Oh, you know, no social media. You were just in the moment sort of thing. And that it's hard to come by nowadays.
You tell your friends where and when, and then everyone was just there.
Right.
You know what? I feel your social media, your friends where and then it gets to the day they're like, oh, you still going?
That's so true.
We're all guilty of it, but times are just different, man.
Times are built different. That's the phrase nowadays, isn't it? Times are built different.
But I guess as well, what we fail to remember with that is that we were kids and we didn't have much stuff to do.
Yeah. We're adults now. There's responsibility to be had, and with responsibility comes tough times. But tough times build stronger people. So that's all that matters. Exactly. So building on that, I wanted to get into something like Chester was kind of like against that whole new metal thing because he wasn't into one genre, as the majority of his albums have said. And for you and myself, we probably know him mainly from like Hybrid Theory and Meteora, like those original like rock, like heavy rock with the element of screamo, element of like pain. I was wondering, did
it
you
happens, I've actually been listening to those a load this week. Before I even spoke to you about doing this podcast, those had been my soundtrack for this week anyway.
It's so funny that you should say that, because like I listen to those when I'm working out. Like they're two of like that keep you going. They give you the blood flowing, and it's such a, you know, I didn't realize, you know, the sort of pain and suffering that were within the album from Chester's point of view. But for me personally, I gain a lot of sort of clarity and a little bit of just pushing myself a little bit further. What do you get out of them?
Similar sort of thing. Obviously, when you're younger, you listen to it and you think, oh my God, this is so heavy. I've never heard anything like this. It's got rap in it, but I still really like it, all this sort of stuff. And you just take it at face value, and because you're a kid, you think it's the best thing ever. And then you grow up still liking it, but the older you get, you listen to it more, and you actually start to understand a bit more. Because, I don't know, when you're a kid, you hear the words, and you think, okay, this sounds cool. Yeah. But when you're an adult, you actually take it in a lot more, and you understand what it means, or you can interpret what it means. And maybe you think, yeah, this guy was going through some shit, and you can probably relate to it a bit more as well. I mean, hopefully not, but
yeah,
you know, it can be related to.
It can be. And I was about to say, like, I didn't realize until I was doing my research today, and, you know, this is years later after Hybrid Theory and Meteor have been released, you know, with 20 plus years later. I didn't realize Chester had been in an incident when he was a kid. He was molested. This is now, you know, he put this out there back in, I think it was 2007, 2008 in Kerrang. And yeah, I mean, him and Henry Rollins share that while Chester wrote his lyrics and then fell into alcoholism. it seems Henry fell into working out heavily and and going traveling basically. But they share that, and it does
Everyone's got
seem
their coping methods. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I was going to ask you, do you think that rock stars have this sort of like, what I say rock star, what I mean is like guys who do music and they put these heavy emotions out there. Do you think they are carrying a little baggage with them?
I do it all the time. It's you just reminded me of the abuse thing. I think, is it Jacoby Shaddix from Papa Roach? He had a similar sort of thing when he was younger.
Yeah.
If I remember reading about that in Kerrang. Obviously, with the recent passing of Joey Jordison, that's reminded me of a few things, and I've been listening to a load of their music again.
Yes.
And you think their first couple of albums, well, all their albums really, but their first couple especially, are just full of this really sort of raw, aggressive anger. And if you read in interviews and stuff, like when they were doing Iowa, it was a really turbulent, messed up time. So it does create good music. I guess they pay a price for it.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like, especially with newer stuff where music is more emotional, not that it's necessary, but it's a key sort of building block for that kind of music.
It is, yeah, and it's really sad because obviously you lost well, Chris Cornell from Soundgarden had the same fate as both Joey Jordison and you know, when they're taken too early, basically.
Didn't Chris sing at Chester's funeral?
It was the other way around. Chester sang at Chris's.
That was it.
Yeah,
that was the one. Yeah,
and
it sucks, man.
Yeah, and
Don't know how he held it together.
I think that was part of it. That was one of the last straws for Chester. I think Chris's death really sort of took a blow to him. He was a close friend, and a lot of people didn't understand why Chris killed himself because he had everything basically. This guy had, you know, a lifetime of albums and, you know, traveling and seeing and having everything that most people would want. And linking to that, Chester said something in an interview that really got me, and something that we all should realize before any sort of like money or fame or anything is given to you, is that even if you obtain success, you still have to deal with the day-to-day life of depression, anxiety, and the things you dealt with before you were successful.
That's the thing, man. You can think of it like this. You could go to the biggest, most fancy party with everyone there, and things can be great. And yeah, you've got that side of things, but you can still go home to an empty house or a depressing house. I mean, you get there and you just think, you're sort of trapped with your thoughts. It can happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used those words as well, because there was another interview where, and it was really kind of sad because it was one of the closer ones near to 2017, where Chester said to an interviewer, like, this space between my head is like a dark place that is always out to get me. And sadly, I mean, for me personally, when I saw how the interviewer responded, I was kind of taken aback and like, you laughed at it. Why are you laughing? Like, this is something, this guy's putting his emotions out there quite seriously. Yeah. And you don't realize, I think a lot of people in the moment when we say stuff like this, they don't take it too seriously. They're trying to detach from it because it's so.
Or they might just see it as like a touch of showmanship, maybe, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see that in normal people? Do you think people try and cover up that emotion a little bit?
Oh yeah, 100%. Especially, I think now that it's such a widely recognized thing, it's, I want to say, trivialized. You know, we've all done it, but I think whilst people understand it more, with that comes people will joke about it and trivialize it more. And you know, maybe if that's how they feel comfortable talking about it, then you know, maybe it's a good thing. But it's always a double-edged sword, I suppose.
It is indeed, and I think that's actually related quite well with how we talk about the 90s and how we talk about the noughties and in this, you know, quite nostalgic, blurry, beautiful way in the sense of all these nice things, because the other side of that was that there were things going on in the background that we weren't aware of, that were happening, that we trivialize today, and that we just deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
The fact,
I think a lot of time people, again, something we're all guilty of, just tend to look at the better side of things. I mean, look at, for example, I don't know, 50s America is always painted as being this
yeah,
glamorous time, and you've got diners and cool cars and stuff. But then you also got to remember they were just some racist ass people about them, man. It's not much better now, but
yeah.
you know,
Well,
there was some dark stuff.
I hope the KKK aren't marching in the 4th of July parade nowadays. Let's just put it that way. Because that was happening back then, and that was a thing in many places in the south of the US. So very well made point right there, is that we can all glorify eras of history without realizing that there's always a downside. It's pretty dark as well. So we've talked about emerging onto the scene. You know, Chester's coming in with Lincoln Park. I wanted to talk to you about a story that I heard, that actually this is you know, a little bit of a lighter tone, and it kind of describes Chester in quite a good light, and how this is how you and me, we should probably, if we ever get any sort of success ever in life, we should probably deal with, like, you know, there's a inbuilt part of everybody where they're like, I'm gonna show everybody what I'm like when I'm successful, you know, sort of that, like, oh yes, look at me, like, ha 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 ha, at that point. But the you know, the truth is you want to take the higher path. And this story is exactly that, is that Chester talks about going on his first tour ever, and they don't name the band who was headlining the tour at the time, but we just, I think it was assumed that it was Union Cross who were the band. I've never heard of this band.
Ringing no bells there, dude.
Ringing no bells. There you go. And apparently these guys were complete drama queens. Like, they were taking up every tour bus. They were like taking every single like piece of space there was. They treated every other band like shit. And throughout the entire tour, they did this. And Linkin Park, they went on multiple tours where there were bands like this. And so Chester and like the Mike Shinoda and the rest of the band sort of said, like, you know, if we're ever in that same position, we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so I think it's like when they get to the height of their prime of their careers, you know, early 2008 era, and they see this guy, the lead singer from the band Union Cross, and he comes in, he's like, oh, how you doing? You guys are doing brilliantly. Let's have a chat, you know, let's see how you're doing. And obviously, if you're in Chester's position, you could have a moment here where you could like give this guy loads of crap, tell him like, you treat us like shit, like, how dare you, look how well we're doing now. But this guy, he said to them, and I will never be able to get this out of my head, this Union Cross guy, no, I'm not lying here, no cap, literally said to Mike Shinoda and Chester, he said, I should be in your position right now. Our band's better than yours. And this is 7 years after doing the original tour. And, you know, in that position, what would you do, Jordan, if you were told that? Like, if you said that to somebody, like,
Dude, I don't even know. I don't know if I'd laugh in his face or just walk away.
it's hard to describe the emotions that anyone would feel in that position. But apparently, Chester being Chester, he said to him, well, you know, it is what it is. Good luck. And I hope you have a fantastic career. And just left it at that. And I was like, wow,
Pretty humble.
dude, like, he could have done all sorts of things in that moment there. We all dream of moments like that where we meet people that we've disliked in our past, and we want to give them some retribution, some, you know, deal out some revenge. But I want to hear your perspective on this, man.
This sounds like a lot. Sounds a lot like how a lot of rock and roll related fights would start.
Exactly. And I always think of one of your favorite brands where it's like that 80s era where they've got like the hair up and like they jump in the crowd and they punch people in the face when they're like in the coming in, and they have that whole like smashing guitars and like that whole punky vibe to them.
Oh, the
And
good old days.
yeah, well, it's funny, isn't it? Because if you compare that to what Chester's done there, it's very like namaste, sort of like,
Yeah,
over the head.
that's super chilled and humble.
Yeah.
But I think you gotta have a balance, you know. I mean, yeah, it can be fun to jump around and trash the stage and do all the rock and roll stuff, but at the same time, you're still a person. You still got to have these moments of interacting with someone and not being cocky, you know.
100%. And the best thing about having friends like yourself is like they know your past, they know who you were previously, and you can get a nice little taster of reality whenever you get too high on your horse. You know what I mean? Like, like there's that level up there, isn't it? Where you go back home, you have that sort of reality check with your friends. And yeah, I was going to ask you this as somebody who's like an aspiring drummer. You've got your own channel. You're doing things at the moment. You're making moves. Do you ever think to yourself like you aspire to that level and what you'd be like in that position?
It would be nice. I don't know if it will happen or not because, frankly, I have no idea how to make that happen. I just like to play drums sometimes, but I guess we all like to think it wouldn't change us, but
Mm.
I honestly don't think it would change me. I mean, I'm 27 now, and I still, at least in some ways, think and act and play like I do when I was 17. So why should it change from here? You know, I've got a lot more money now than I did when I was 17, and the only difference is that I can now fund the silly ideas I have rather than just thinking about them. It hasn't changed my attitude as a person.
That might make you a little bit stronger, bud, because you have a value for that sort of build to get there, you know? You never know. It might be something. I mean, if someone ever asked for like 5% of your future profits, you'll be able to say no, But
Man,
17.
depends what's on the table.
Oh no, we've got you you're one of the record deals basically willing to happen. Have you heard of those terrible deals back in the past?
I have. I've heard. I think actually it might be my dad that told me. Maybe it was someone else. It doesn't matter who told me, but
Mm.
I have a feeling it was Steve Tyler.
Mm.
It might have even been you that said this. They sort of got him super drunk before
That was
signing a
it.
contract. Yeah, that sort of thing, man. It's, scary stuff, isn't it? Can you imagine just wake up the next day in a pool of your own vomit, and then find out you've like signed your life away, basically.
Yeah, and the fact that that's legal, like you got a
Yeah.
legal contract when you're intoxicated. That's crazy.
Welcome to America, baby.
It is funny how we view America, isn't it? Like we look at it as this
Yeah, that
place
sort
of
of thing just doesn't surprise me, you know.
yeah. It's like a viral video. It always makes me think if something crazy is going to happen, and there's a few things that happen in the UK where I'm like, okay, that's a bit crazy. Like the number 17 bus knocking someone, like literally driving into somebody. Like I've
Oh,
seen
the
that
dude
before.
outside Turtle. Oh my god.
Exactly. And
Whatever
then
happened to
getting
that
up.
guy? I hope he's okay.
It's just yeah. Shout out to the guy who recovered, got up on his feet, and got hit by the number 17 bus.
Yeah, he
Just
seems alright.
madness.
So
Shout out. But like in America, like we're talking about like people shooting rockets into each other, like just people firing guns in crazy
yeah, it's crazy,
positions.
man. You should always never do that.
Yeah. I mean, it does make me laugh because whenever I look at Lincoln Park, and I tried looking up stories today, genuinely for this podcast to find stuff where they'd gone
To see if they did
crazy.
any rock and roll shit.
They didn't. They didn't do any rock and like the craziest thing is like Chester gets awarded for helping with charity basically, and like
Oh
doing
man,
stuff
that is
that's
hardcore.
You
I
know,
like that though, man. It's humble,
it's
and it shows that, you know, I've still got a lot of respect for musicians that have the rock and roll life, because that's part of it.
mm,
But I think with Chester and Linkin Park's case, it just goes to show they're really about their craft, you know.
oh man, I'm glad you said that, because for me personally, whenever I compare them, because they have lasted a long time. Like a lot of people
Mm.
look at bands, some bands just fizzle out and they burn bright, they do amazing, but you know, they collapse basically.
I was actually thinking, sorry to interrupt you, I was thinking
No,
about
chocolate.
this. I think it was actually today I was thinking about it,
Mm.
because, you know, when you're isolating at home, you have nothing to do but think. But so many bands now just don't have that sort of staying power.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I either said this on the last podcast, or I've just said it in general because it's a thing that I rant about. Um, yeah, you think about all these bands from the 80s and 90s, you know, Platinum Them fizzled out as well. But there's so many pieces of music and bands and albums and all that sort of stuff that have become classics. I don't hear anything come out now that I think this is going to be massive in 20 years' time, you know?
Yeah. And I do feel that there has been some sort of lack of creativity move. I mean, some of the bands I hear nowadays are just kind of carbon copies of previous bands from years
Yeah,
ago. I've mentioned them before. I do like them, don't get me wrong. Greta Van Fleet are a very talented band and they're great to listen to, but they do remind me of Van Halen, or like the, you know, that sort of 80s
yeah.
vibe, uh, just a repeat. And they're the younger band, you know, they're meant to be the aspiring change the music scene era, uh, but it I'm
They're like
hoping.
what Parkway Drive are to their own music, just more of the exact same good stuff.
Yes, exactly. And well, they have their own genre, don't they, and in some ways, because of that, because of how Parkway
Yeah.
Drive are. And to be honest, I don't listen to enough Parkway Drive to be able to understand the
I
like
mean, neither,
reference.
dude. But what I've heard has it'd be hard to tell which album a song's off, you know.
That's savage. That just means everything just consistent. It's just like
But you
monotone track.
know, a lot of great bands have done that. They stick to their formula.
They do.
Slayer, I love Slayer to bits.
Yep.
Again, you hear a song, couldn't tell which album it's off. But Linkin Park sort of didn't do that. Their sound changed a lot,
Yes. And
even between the first two. When you think they're quite a similar pair of albums.
yeah.
A few moments later.
Wait, what were you going to say there, bud, between Hybrid Theory and Meteora?
I was yeah. I think I'll just cut in again. So yeah, I think the amount that you hear their sound mature between Hybrid Theory and Meteora, even that little gap out of their entire career, makes up such a little slice of it. The amount it changed between just those two albums, even though they're quite similar, was massive. And you hear them change their formula so much between each album, to the point where, you know, you could be forgiven for thinking they've lost their way a little bit, if you want to call it that. Because I was a huge fan of their first two, and then everything after that, a little bit more each time, I was like, this is it's not really what made me love them in the first place. It's good, but it's not what I came here for.
But believe it or not, for me, it was the other way around. I mean, I love Hybrid Theory and Meteora. They're great. But for me personally, Castle of Glass and What Remains and all of these great songs in the early 2010s, for me personally, I was able to listen to that music with my dad. My dad and me would go on road trips and we'd chuck those in the car and we'd be able to listen to them together and be like, oh, this is the
Awesome.
great. This is so cool. Like, and it brought us together, and I love stuff like that when you relate with two different generations of people
Yeah, I think
on
it's
the same
important to
music.
do.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, for me, actually, I want to make a point here as well, is that there is a big thing where bands evolve and people don't like that evolution. And that's fair enough. People can have their opinion. What I didn't like was in Chester's later years when he did do One More Light. That video, before he died, got something along the lines of 250,000 dislikes, something crazy like that, something mad, something that really upset me personally, because I looked at it and
Probably
I
upset
could,
him as well.
yeah, he did go on record and say he put his heart and soul into that album, and people basically shat on it. And the worst thing is that when he passed away, is that the like ratio changed and 2 million people liked it. And it pissed me off, if I'm honest. People are
But
cowards.
you got to think that it could have been his death brought their music to light a bit. You know how people are only appreciated more after their death.
Yeah.
You could have had loads of people who have never heard of Linkin Park suddenly hear about this dude dying, and
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that.
Like, I'll go check about the person that came up, it's ring, and you get fans. That's their first experience, and they like it. It also could be like you said, it could change in the tune. Say that again. Sorry, you cut out, dude.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I was saying it, you know, as much as I want to be Mr. Positive in that area when it comes down to like changing and stuff like that, I do feel that in that case, in that specific case, it kind of, for me, there's no real sort of, you can't redeem yourself as fans when you basically attack a man. I mean, fair enough, like people don't know that he's in a depressed state, but like if you listen to the lyrics enough, you can hear the pain. And it kind of,
A few moments later.
It does make me wonder if not just Chester, but artists in general will sit there and look at their YouTube channel and look at the reviews they get and look at how many dislikes they get, or go through comments on their various social media, because you know, like, you get all the nice ones at the top, but you scroll a little bit further down, you see all the people just talking trash about it. Makes me wonder if they do look at that and if it does get to them, because it's like you said, if you pour your heart and soul into it and you're all about your craft and it doesn't go down well, yeah, people aren't obliged to like it, but if they don't, it does suck.
yeah. And when how he described that period of his life, I imagine it was basically the last straw for him personally.
Yeah, it probably didn't help at all. Yeah, because if you've already, if things have already piled up to that extent, and then you are in, I guess, if you think of your fans like a family, if they turn on you, yeah, it's gonna be horrible, man. Like that would push a man.
Exactly. And I wanted to get into this a little bit in the sense that, you know, society's now moved to this point of like, you either like something or you dislike something. So black and white, isn't it? You know, and with depression as well, like you said, we can trivialize that idea. But I want to understand from your point of view as well, as who's someone who's seen, like, you know, we've grown up with social media, what you think of the current state of things.
A few moments later.
No, I don't think it helps, to be honest. You know, it's a great tool for staying in touch and networking, and I owe my career to social media effectively, because without Facebook, I would never have managed to build my job as a photographer and make a living from it. Stuff comes from it. You got just trolls and bullies and image issues, all this sort of stuff that stems from it. And sometimes I do wonder if it has sort of, I'm gonna sound like a right old fart here, if it sort of ruined the youth a little bit, because not that I tend to be around young people that much, but even people in their like earlier 20s, they'll sit there on their phone flat out watching TikToks over and over. I'm like, you're literally like a rat just itching for another pellet in a test lab. Like, they're just a slave to this little box. And I think people don't do stuff enough that makes them want to not check their phone.
Yeah. And we've not done anything about that as a society as well as individuals. Is like we just create more content. We just create more for people to watch and for people to listen to, and
Here we are feeding that.
Here we are feeding the great beast, feeding up.
But it's one of those things, man. Like it's an inescapable part of life now.
But you can add some new stuff, can't you? Like you can try and put stuff out there that makes people aware of that.
Yeah, I think it'll go person to person. It's sort of responsibility that everyone has to themselves. It's just to strike a balance.
Yeah.
It's on the subject of mental health. I don't think it is good for your mental health to spend that much time on the phone. I'm as guilty as the next guy. Sometimes I'll sit on Instagram and just look what's on there. But even then, I'll go maybe like 5-10 posts down my newsfeed and think, nah, bored now, and go and do something that doesn't involve that, because I'm aware that I don't need to be staring at my phone all the time.
It's so, again, it's a great description, because I think to myself of Chester's description of like he would go away from those things. He would go do stuff for family. He would cook and he would clean and he would speak to people, go speak to bandmates, go make music in order to get away from his mind. And it's got a very similar sense as how people treat their phones. They go and do stuff to get away from the technology. Do you think that's like the mental thought process is the same there?
Yeah, it's like when you get these I can't what they call them now. You get the unplugged retreats or whatever you call it, where people will go on a holiday specifically to get away from their phone. I'm like, dude, if you have to go on a holiday to get away from your phone or to stop using your phone so much, there's bigger issues at hand.
It's so true. You've got some underlying problems there, buddy.
Honestly, man, yeah, it is worrying, but it's also not my business.
I like you. Yeah, that hands up in the air. At the end of the day, we're just shouting out opinions here that should not be taken seriously. I am going to emphasize that for people. Like, we're just chatting because I love putting stuff out there. Doesn't mean I'm going to apply it to everybody, because one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life is thinking that just because I'm doing something and it's working for me doesn't mean that everyone else should do that.
That's the thing, man. Not everybody fits in boxes.
But try telling a younger version of yourself that, and I do think about this a lot, is that as I've got older, I've managed to understand that everybody has some sort of like story going on in their life. Everybody's got a path. But
there is a word for that. I can't remember what it's called, but I don't know if you're sort of stood in a crowd or something and you just think to yourself about how each of these people in the crowd has their own story and their whole life and their whole web of stuff they got going on, and then you sort of get lost in the thought of it. There is a word for this. I don't remember what the word is or what language it's in, but yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah,
that's gonna bug me now. I'm gonna have to go find it out.
I mean, tell you what I'll do afterwards is I'll look it up and I'll ping it up in the corner here, as I've done in previous scores. I mean, for the audio listeners, I'm so sorry. Like, I can't just shout in the mic afterwards, like the word maybe, but like maybe I should do post credit cut now, and we'll see what happens. But I wish my editing was that good.
Director's cut.
Director's I love that. But yeah, that was it as well. Restore Rollins' death.
Yeah, we went off on some real tangents there. Sorry, man.
No. I'm trying to find some stuff here that's. Oh, that was it as well. Like, relationships is a real big one nowadays, and I'm relating this to what we've just said about how the fact that we see through phones, we go through dating apps and stuff like that. And Chester was talking about how, he would go see people, and as I said earlier, he would go create. He spent his birthday, right, his last birthday before he passed away, just doing nothing. His birthday he spent watching kung fu movies, eating cake, and eating ice cream. And the reason why this
Sounds
is
like the right
important,
time.
dude, exactly, it sounds like a great time. But it's important because he was saying, like Mike Shinoda said, it's because he never stopped going. He was either creating his craft, spending time with family, or out with friends, or doing extracurricular activities, you know? And to me, that's like, wow. Like this guy, to me, understood that, like, even though he doesn't say social media or he doesn't say like modern day life, but to me, what he's doing is he's distracting himself with what's important to get away from that sort of negative
Mm.
mindset, that depression.
This is the thing, man. When you see someone that's constantly on full gas
Mhm.
and always doing something and never takes a minute to sit down, it does make you wonder, what are they running from? What is it they've got going on that they never wanna have a minute alone with their thoughts?
What would you say to somebody who doesn't take breaks, who doesn't stop? Because today's society does, and I'm going to say it here, does revolve a lot around work, work, work. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but there's this sort of culture where you've got like people like Gary V and like all of these like influencers. It's like, you need to work so many hours. You've got to do this, that, and the other. You need to be working
Yeah, the sort
constantly.
of grind culture, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's got even worse over the course of the pandemic. Oh, we're on pandemic talk now. That's good. But since people have been stuck at home, there's this real sort of, I don't want to call it social nagging, to just be super productive all the time. And it started off innocently enough, with people making sourdough and growing plants. But there's just this thing of everyone has to have a side hustle, and you always have to be doing this and doing that. And if you're not working out X amount and not doing this, that, and the other at work, that, I don't know, it somehow makes you lesser. But there needs to be a little bit more social emphasis on chilling out every now and then and taking a break. Give yourself a break, drink some water.
It's well done. Me and Jordan were talking previously that I am guilty of all of those things that Jordan has just said, basically. So for those who don't
To
know,
everyone listening to this, if you have Chris's number, send him a text as you're listening to it and tell him to have a drink.
And that will be a reminder for me. Oh dear, that'd be great.
I hope that comes to bite you lots.
Jordan, unlike you, I don't know enough people for that to come and bite me in the ass.
Well, we can hope.
Oh god, yeah. Oh mate, that's my worst nightmare. People sending me texts all the time. Yeah. To sort of emphasize on that as well, is like I did. I think I've spoken about this before, but I basically did 6 months of work this year without a break. I didn't take any holiday. I just did 6 months work all the way from January to June, non-stop, grinding it out.
It's not good for you, man.
Well, I burnt out, mate, and it's made me
This is the thing.
realize.
If you can do it, then some people are up to it, but it's not healthy to do. Humans, we're not designed to do that.
No. And it's also made me realize, like, this whole 9 to 5 culture has also become a toxic thing in itself as well. Is that, there's so much time people spend working, and we will get back to Chester in this, but this is really important to say. Is like part of Chester's death was the fact that he worked himself into the ground, basically, and that led to alcoholism and running away from his problems as well.
This is the thing of it. That's, I guess, he's showing the worst extreme of it, but it is a thing that can happen. If you, it sort of pushes yourself beyond the parameters of what humans as an animal are supposed to do. You don't see, if you flick on the Discovery Channel, you're not going to see a lion just on smoke 24/7. They're going to have a nap in the sun sometimes because they understand that they need a break. why do humans find it so hard to have that? I guess
Yeah.
the world we live in has sort of told everyone that we need to be working all the time, and I guess with the price of things nowadays we do, but it's important to have a break.
It is important to have a break, and I think that society's created an invisible tally chart for everybody. And it's idea of, oh, who's going on the nice holidays? Oh, who's wearing the nice suits? Who's driving the nice cars? And who's doing this and who's doing that? And I think one of the big things here is that they don't take into account rest, recovery, sleep. Big one there as well, because Chester also admitted to not getting more than 6 hours. I think his maximum was 6 hours a night.
Yeah,
So
it's
he
not
was
good.
getting
That shit will have a very strong cumulative effect on a person.
How much do you sleep, Jordan? What's your sleep like amount?
Dude, it varies. When I was younger, I used to constantly strive for between 10 and 12 hours a night.
Nice.
Because, you know, I managed to do it and it was nice. But now, again, it varies. Sometimes it's 5-6 hours. Sometimes it's maybe 7. Not enough. I'm always tired. But I can't sleep that much. Even if I work away at night until 4 or 5 in the morning, I'll be up again at, I don't know, between 10 and 11, because that's just when I wake up.
And do you feel like the difference between like that 8 hours and that 5? Like, can you tell?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I never really wake up feeling rested anyway. I don't know how people do it, but it's more towards the end of the day when you start flagging a bit and your heels get heavier, you know.
Well, in your case, sir, I know exactly why you don't feel rested, and that's because nocturnal, non-sleeping in the night is actually adverse for the human brain and adverse for the human body. And it's been proven by Dr. Michael. Oh God, I can't remember his last name. He wrote a book called "Sleep: Why Sleep is Important, Why We Should Sleep." And
I think
if you read that,
one of my friends actually told me about this book actually, because he was sticking
concerned.
it on me about. Yeah, he was telling me how bad it is. And I was like, dude, I know. I've probably knocked a whole buttload of years off my life by now.
It's like smoking, bro. It's like smoking. You know, you see
at
those
least
people.
If I take up smoking and get a day job, they might cancel out.
I'm not going to make that bet, bud. I'm not going to make that bet with you.
Hey, man, you can look at me like that all you want, but you don't drink enough water, so.
Why do you think I'm shredded 90% of the time? It's just why, because my body's just dried out. It's like
maybe that's why I'm starting to look a bit plump around the edges. I've got too much water retention going on.
You've got too much water. That's it. Just dry fast for it. No, I'm not going to recommend that on the podcast. That is evil beyond.
4 or 5 liters a day is messing me up, you know.
Oh my God, I can't even think of doing that. I can do 2 liters. Like that's as good as it gets for me. But
dude,
yeah.
with the amount of running and lifting you do, you should be on way more.
Maybe that's yeah. I mean,
crazy,
that's
crazy boy.
Crazy. Yeah, it's definitely it. And you know, getting back to sort of Chester, I forgot where we were. That's bad. The podcast
we derailed
host
again.
Yeah, derailed. I'm gonna go onto a random one here, but one funny moment that I picked up on that I did think was a little bit off, you know, a little bit rock and roll. It was like Chester was apparently in the crowd for like a 2014 gig after they released Hunting Party, and he was doing the gig on live television, and apparently a fan took 4 fingers and literally straight like into his mouth while he was like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, dude, I feel speechless for him. What the hell? That's just a strange thing to do.
It's just like stories like that. I mean, that's disgusting. Number one, like that's
you don't do that. You don't put 4 fingers in someone's mouth.
I mean, it's just
Even if they
like,
want you to, don't do that.
it's grim, man. Just choke the person, okay? It's fine. Like, we'll do that. But like, again, foreign object, number one. Number two, like, he's in the middle of singing. What goes through a person's mind when they think that's okay? Like, genuinely. I'm so
They didn't have
confused.
respect for the craft.
they go to the gig, they're like, you know what, I'm really not enjoying today's gig, therefore instead of the 5-fingered death punch, it's 4 fingers.
Yeah, the 4-finger song pause.
Just
Yeah, I
like,
don't know.
jeez.
That's maybe they just sold themselves out and thought, this could be my claim to fame. Let's really annoy someone.
Well, I
Like
think Chester,
like that interviewer that tried to kiss Will Smith or whatever it was. Do you remember that?
oh my god, yeah, and he's
And he
fully
like
married at
slapped
that
the
point,
dude.
wasn't he? Just like,
Yeah.
Jesus. Oh my god.
Oh man. Yeah.
Some people have
just
weird boundaries. They have like
Yeah, I
no
think
boundaries.
I think it seems to be worse with famous people because they assume that they can do what they want to them, or they can ask what they want or say what they want. And you gotta remember that they're people too. Especially, this whole Chester thing nails that home or drives that home is that they are people.
Yes.
They have
Oh
their own
man.
thoughts and feelings.
If you're going to learn anything from this podcast, is that reality is harsh, number one. Number two, like, celebrities are people. We're all people. We're all, you and the camera, or you listening right now, you're a person. Like, this is how we're going to get
That's
through
the thing.
life.
It can happen to anyone.
Oh, yeah,
Check on your mates,
exactly.
people.
Oh, that's a big one. Yes. So again, one thing that is kind of toxic, I will put it. I know that gets thrown around a lot, but I will use the word toxic culture in the idea that, oh, I'm strong enough. I can take it. I can really get through today. Like, I don't need to speak about my feelings. Let's get past that a little bit, And I think what you've said there, Jordan, in checking in on mates. Actually, a question for you: how would you check in on your mates, and what's the best way of doing it?
Don't know. I think really it is just a simple thing to do. Just send them a text message or send them a message of some sort and say, "How are you doing?" And if don't be pushy with it, but just really, how are you doing? That's what
And
it takes.
actually listen.
You haven't got to be pushy with it. You haven't got to make a whole big deal of it. Sometimes they're not going to want to talk about it, but even if one time out of 100 times you've asked your mates, someone says, "Oh, actually, I'm having a bit of a shit week," talk to them. You might save a life. You might help someone.
Yes, and that's a real big one. There is that during the pandemic and during the last 2 years, suicide rates have gone up by, I think it was something along the lines of 20%, not just only within the United Kingdom, but throughout the world.
Yeah, I can well believe it.
We should all be a little bit more aware. I know mental health, as you've said, Jordan, has become one of those things that people just throw out there, and it can become a little bit like, chucking information into the wind a little bit. But something that I love doing with Jordan and friends, sending memes. I'm not gonna lie, that makes my day. Like, let's not beat around the bush here, Jordan. We get a total kick out of that.
We do. I think that in itself is another good way to keep tabs on people. If you have a group chat or something and you regularly have a laugh in there, if someone goes quiet, man, if someone's having a bad time or they're a bit snowed under.
Yes.
Yeah, just ask them. Like, I do it every now and then. If one of my friends goes particularly quiet and it's someone that I know I'm close enough with to ask, just send a message and be like, "Yo, dude, you've been quiet this week. What's up?" And normally they'll tell you.
It's a big one, is literally just taking that first step, because something that I have seen is, and I've spoken to people about this before, is that we're all feeling that we're all in our own lives, in our own bubbles, and you can feel like that self-importance, like, oh, why should I have to do it? Why do I have to like put it out? It's just like do the right thing. I think the main thing is like
No,
be
I
the better
think if you
person.
if you think about it that way, when it's one of your mates in question, then are you really there, mate?
Ah,
Like it shouldn't. There should be no hesitation to ask if your mate's right.
yes. Do you really care? Do you actually want to? And this is something that I found recently is like my core friend group. I'm happy to talk to anyone at any time of the day. I mean, unless Jordan's going to send me a 3 o'clock in the morning message because he's at peak hours and he's like, I'm going to get Chris back because finally
Beep
I
beep.
have
Drink
the
some water.
unlimited power and he needs to drink some water in the middle of the night. Then sure, why
Did you
not?
take some water to bed? Yeah, I won't text you at night. Don't worry.
But you know what I mean? Like that. Even then, it's hilarious in itself, and also I think it's important to consider that and to say like, put it aside. If they are truly a close mate, you're gonna override your programming to think that you've got better things to do, and you've got to think that this is truly part of it. And if you can learn anything from this, is that what me and Jordan have talked about here is Chester didn't have somebody reach out on a regular basis towards him, clearly, because if he did, his death may not have happened, and he may have had someone to speak to.
But you've also, I don't know, maybe he did. Maybe there's someone messaging we don't know about. But what you got to consider is how bad it had to have been and felt for that to be what he saw as his only option. 'Cause you get this a lot with especially older generations who don't really understand it. Or if someone does commit suicide, they say, "Oh, that's so selfish. How could they do that?" But what you got to ask is, like I said, how bad did their life have to be, and how bad did they think things were for that to be what they thought was their appropriate course of action?
Exactly. And
it's got to be horrible.
I mean, for me personally, I look at suicide for me. I mean, in the Japanese culture, they honor it. They think it's like some sort of way of, honoring the warrior who's been defeated. And you can probably, go into different cultures and see different ways. But in the West, for me personally, I think of it as quite sad, quite, a lot of people say cowardice as well. I hate that. It's not cowardice. It's actually probably the bravest thing somebody could ever do, because you're taking your own life.
100%.
Like,
most people have got this self-preservation within them from birth, more or less. And if you think how big your balls have got to be to overcome that.
Yeah. It's huge, because our programming as human beings in our DNA is to run from the danger, to sprint away. Like you said earlier, when you see a lion, it's resting when it's tired. When you see a lion, when it's running away from danger from a poacher, it's sprinting away. It ain't just sat there like, yeah, time for me to die. I'm going to kill myself in this period of, the moment because I'm depressed. Like, it's just not going to happen, is it? Society, I think, is also building its own coffin in some way, similar to the suicide rate that's going up. I don't know if you ever heard of like influenza. Did you ever hear of that?
Yeah.
Like in like the idea of I think it was rich kids who were taking their own lives because they basically didn't feel like they were important. I think there was some sort of mental health issues going on, but it happened in California, where just consistent suicides were happening because their parents weren't at home because they were high paid people, and there was all of this sort of social media going on. And
it's like I said, man, nobody is safe.
Yes. And something I wanted to mention as well is that a lot of people have a misconception of depression. I've talked to quite a few people who've suffered from it previously. And for me personally, I've felt depressed. I've never been depressed. There's a huge difference between somebody who has been clinically depressed, so who's been prescribed drugs, and somebody who is feeling depressed, and whether that's identified with.
It's not the most fun thing.
No, but now that we know it's out there, it's worth tackling. Like Jordan's already provided solutions for you right here for friends. If you're struggling with it, like there's gonna be ways about it. Get out of your head. Like even though Chester did have like all of these things going on, we have talked about some funny moments here where it's like that's gonna change your life if you hear these stories, like these silly stories, like where he had that first headliner, where he's had like fans mess with him. Like I'm pretty sure he had a stalker, Jordan, at some point. Did you ever hear about that?
I did not, but it doesn't surprise me. People do that sort of thing to famous people.
Yeah, and apparently Chester was an avid fan mail person, so he would go through the fan mail and he would reply personally. So he was a big, and that's how one of the stalkers got him, was that the address of the place that he was doing this from, they found, and like it went from there. So it's crazy how people, it's even worse nowadays because we have technology, but that's, to me, that's mental.
That's the thing, man. It's nice. It's nice to hear back and to talk with your heroes and stuff, but you still got to respect once again that they are human. And
Yeah.
give them their space. Don't overstep the mark.
Yeah. And for me personally, I'm really upset that I never got to see him live. I never got to see Linkin Park live. Like that
No,
will
me
forever
neither.
haunt me. Yeah.
It's the same thing with Joey Jordison. He was like my drum hero since I was a little kid.
Dude.
Never seen him play. Never got the chance.
Live while the sun shines, my friends. Like that's something I'm gonna say here and now. Like make hay while the sun shines, because like I've been lucky enough to see some of my favorite bands, but I haven't seen all of them. And with Linkin Park and Chester, that will forever haunt me because he had such an impact with his lyrics, with the way he lives, and the stuff that I've recently discovered about him and how he treated charities, and like Jordan said as well, how humble he's shown to be when it comes down to adverse sort of reactions to people and around him. And we've talked about depression today, and we've talked about mental health and how there are small steps to be taken. I think I say repeatedly, and Jordan, I don't know if you've heard this from me personally, but I say, like, if you're really struggling, just message like the channel or message or put a comment or anything like that, because
Yeah,
like
100%.
if somebody can hear you, it's going to make all the difference at the end of the day.
That's the thing, man. A shot in the dark is still a shot.
Yeah.
A tiny step in the right direction is still gonna have you closer to somewhere good.
Exactly. And I want to end it on a bright note. I'm not ending it there because I do want to tackle something here. Jordan Green has a YouTube channel, of which I am going to post in the box below. I want to talk about Jordan's new work. Well, we've talked about Chester. Chester's an amazing person, as we've talked about, but we want to talk a little bit, but at the end of this podcast, about what you're currently working on, all the work you've put in so far. I want to hear a little bit about that, because I've gone through all of your YouTube videos, as you may have seen, or not. And I want to hear about what's the best part of the work that's come so far? What's the worst, the hardest bit? Like what we've been up to?
I think the best part is just doing it, having fun with it, man. Yes, it costs money to do, and it costs time to sit there making all the stuff, but it's fun. It's my hobby. The worst part, I would have to say, is trying to actually get to a point where I can make and release my own music, because personally I feel super driven to do it. I feel like I've got some time, I've got some money, I've got a whole buttload of motivation to do it, but I'm a drummer, man. I don't write music. I need people to write music with, and
Yes.
it is a real pain to just try and actually get people on board and focused and consistently having an input.
And finding somebody who suits you as well.
Well, yeah, that's another whole problem in itself. But I think I've been in talks with quite a few people, and hopefully sometime this year there'll be stuff coming out that's super different to anything I've done before. So yeah, stay tuned for that if it materializes. But I am doing what I can to make it materialize. COVID has been a bit of a setback. I've missed a few studio sessions over it.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
As soon as I
You
get back
can't
in there, get
control
right
that,
in.
can you? You know, you
No,
can't
no, I
control
can't.
it. No, it's like, you know.
But I will say this: I've kicked COVID's ass. I feel fine now. I was only ill for like three days or something.
You hear that, COVID? You ain't got nothing on us.
Walk in the park, mate. Don't know how people are making such a big deal of it. It was fine.
You just like
you
you're
gotta
drumming
drink.
your way out of it. You just drumming your
just
way.
drink 4 liters of water a day, man, and you'll be good.
That's it, man. That's it. My
You won't get ill.
natural immune system repels anything. I only get ill once a year, so I'm good. But
just drink 5 liters of water a day, man. Be a man.
I'm just gonna send you a photo now of me drowning myself in water. Just literally, just like, oh no, just like a waterfall of water.
And whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. Guys, I'm going to end it there. Jordan has given you a slice of what his future work's going to be like. I'm excited, to say the least, because I love hearing, if I'm honest, I'm a huge fan of the Blink-182 covers because they have a special place in my heart. And obviously, they're just killer drums, Travis, killer. But yeah, keep doing your work, mate. And, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. You keep doing it too, man. You've provided me many hours of good listening so far.
Oh wow, I appreciate that, and let's hope we don't bore people to death.
That's right.
That's all right. That's exactly it. So this has been a Taylor's Tales podcast. This has been Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and this has been a Chester Bennington podcast with Jordan Green. Thank you. Goodbye.